So what I'm going to discuss about today is how to find a job in academia in Japan. There is no fixed recipe about this kind of a process or anything, but what I'm going to share with you guys today is my own perspective, build upon a few pillars of my own experience in Japan over the last few years, lessons I learned from hearing others' stories, and how my professors actually groomed me or pushed me beyond my capacity or beyond my capabilities and helped me find a position in Japan. So a quick introduction. I'm a Mac scholar, still a Mac scholar. I'm finishing soon though. I came to Japan in 2015. I was a research student at Kyodai for 1 year. I started my master's in 2016. And after graduating with my master's, I did my PhD in the same lab at Kyoto University. And I am supposed to finish in March 2021. The reason I'm here today is from 2021 April, I'll be joining a Hosei University in Tokyo as an academic assistant, become a research associate. It has a contract period of 3 years, extendable up to 5 years. It is getting straight to the point. Academic job hunting in Japan. I thought a lot about this, how to present it before you, and then I came up with something like this. I divided the whole process. It's basically my 6 years in Japan. I divided the whole process in 3 stages. The first one is a reconnaissance stage, which is basically means an initial assessment. We use it a lot in surveying. We use this term a lot in military and other stuff, but it basically means doing a recon. You try to read the air, you try to gather information, you try to understand what's going on around you. The second stage, call it the preparation stage. And the third stage is where you start taking actions, where you start the hunting, where you start the job hunting for the academic position. One thing we all understand is that there's a bit of difference between a normal job hunting for a company and a job hunting for an academic position, because academic positions are very, very less. And we will try to put some light over this towards the end of the presentation, but please keep in mind that there is a difference between a normal company job hunting and the academic job hunting in Japan. I'll start with the stage 0. I call it the stage 0, the recon stage. There's a reason I call it stage 0, because in this stage, you basically are not doing too much in terms of action. But what I'm going to speak about is, it doesn't matter at what stage of your course you are in Japan right now. For example, you might be someone who just arrived in Japan, maybe in October. You might be someone who came in April, or it's been 2 years in Japan. One of the first things that many of us don't focus upon when we decide to take upon an academic position, or we decide that we'll try to go work down towards the academic line, it's also applicable to the company job hunting to some extent, is some of us, we don't give enough attention to the lab dynamics. One thing we all need to understand is that every lab is unique, which makes every lab different. You cannot compare yourself with your friend who might be in the same department in a different lab. The dynamics might be entirely different, because it all depends on the head of the lab, the professor. My first suggestion is, try to read the air, try to see how things function. This is very important, because your next steps depend on how your lab is. It is very important to study your lab's dynamics. And one thing, if possible, I would like to suggest you to do is that you find out what your lab seniors are doing after graduation. Does the lab send a lot of people to company? Do they keep some of the students to join them as an assistant professor after they graduate? It happens a lot in Japan. Or do your seniors go to some other countries for a postdoc or something? First point is to try to see how the things are acting in the lab. And one important thing I want you guys to take a look into is the importance of the language in the lab. This topic is a bit sensitive because I personally know that there are many labs where you don't need any Japanese to survive in the lab. Your professors might be fluent in English. It's mostly filled with international students. Even at that situation, try to understand that in your field, in Japan, is it like every researcher is well versed in English, or they are well versed in publishing in reputed international journals, or the language is important in your lab? This is a very important point if you are even thinking, if you're even considering a future in Japan. Once you have breathed the air around you, once you've assessed the situation, you need to understand where you stand. In my opinion, in my perspective, there are basically three types of lab. One, where the guidance is limited, which gives you more freedom of work. You can work on your own ideas. You can decide where you want to go for the conferences and stuff, but the guidance is less. So they expect you to be independent. A type B, where the advisor closely follows your all steps. He guides you, and you need to be in sync with him. Whenever you are planning for a conference, the journal you are choosing, you need to be in sync with him. The type C, where there is a balance. Everything is in an optimum level, the guidance and the freedom. You need to understand where do you stand, because if it's type A, you might need to be a bit more proactive than your type B and type C friends, who might have a chance of getting maybe a 10% help by their professors when they decide to do job hunting in academia or something. But if you belong to the type A, you might to do things, everything on your own. So in the next stage, where I'm trying to go into the preparation stage, all the points are very important for you. So please keep in mind, the preparation stage is going to be very important for you. The first step in the preparation is try and improve your conversational Japanese. I'm not asking for a JLPT N1. I'm not saying you need a JLPT N2. I'm not saying you need to write the kanjis. Your first target, at least, should be improving the level of conversational Japanese. You should be able to communicate at least at the end of 3 years or at the end of 6 years. You need to have a certain level of conversational skill, which combined with your academic achievements will give you a big push if you're looking for a future in Japan. I marked in red because this is very, very important. Being very blunt and being very honest, it is unavoidable in most of the fields if you consider a future in the Japanese academia. Yes, things are changing. Japanese people are publishing more in international journals and all, but the pace is not that fast. So as of now, or at least for the next 5 to 10 years, it's you who have to put the efforts beyond your academic achievement. So if you're someone new who just came to Japan, please keep in mind the language is very, very crucial. You don't need to be an expert by the end of your time in Japan, but having a certain level of grasp on the conversational Japanese changes things for you. It changed things for me too. Learn to be a part of the group. A very, very important aspect of the Japanese culture is you need to be one with the group. What I've seen is in many labs, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. The effort has to come from your side. But in most of the cases, one mistake, I say it's a mistake if you are someone who plan to be in Japan in the future. One mistake that the international student does is that they get tired of the language in the beginning, and then they start maintaining distance. And with the lack of continuous efforts, the distance keeps on increasing. By the end of 1 or 2 years, you are not considered a part of the lab. They don't even ask you when they decide trips and stuff. This is not a very good sign. What I would like to urge you guys is to learn, is to try to work together with your lab mates, your juniors. Find one person with you with whom you can mingle. And then just be a bit persistent with your efforts. When the opportunity comes, of course, there are many labs where the students send their papers to international journals. They go to abroad for doing conferences. Use your skill at the time. Offer them help. Once your professor starts recognizing that you are actually trying to help them, you never know. There's also a chance that you might be also taken in as a research assistant, and you might also get a part of the baito money for helping them the translations and all. But the most important thing that you will do is you will make an impression that you know how to work together in the group. Another important place where many foreigners miss out is communication. We have a language barrier, we have a culture barrier. Japan is a very unique country. It's a very different country. The barriers are real. And unfortunately, the effort has to come from your side. A good communication goes a long way. It's like a relationship. It's the same key to a long-lasting relationship. It's the same key which will help you in clarifying your doubts. It's the same thing which will help you in while you are finalizing your master's thesis or a PhD thesis. What your professor is thinking and what you are doing, if these two things are not in sync, we usually lose a lot of time. And because it's not always easy to get in touch with the professors, and if the communication gap stays there, the effect becomes very huge a few weeks before the final submission of the thesis and all. So what I'm saying is I've seen my other friends having trouble with, I have seen my other lab mates having trouble with. A good communication is very important. And please try to avoid communication gaps. I'll give you a small example. So sometimes it happens that the Japanese people, they expect you to understand things without saying anything. And when you come to Japan for the first time, and if you're not someone from this culture, this is very difficult for you. I have had situations where my professors actually got angry with me, and he even said, like, don't you trust me or something? Because I was not understanding something and I wanted some clarification for it. But because I was asking questions, he was not very comfortable with it, because usually Japanese students, they don't ask questions. So it happened. And then that time I didn't react. I felt a bit bad because I didn't expect him to say like that, because I was being very clear that I am not understanding what he's trying to say. I just kept quiet. I waited a week, and then where I think in the next time when we went out for a coffee or something, I just brought back the same conversation again, and I got my answer. So sometimes we need to go around a bit. We may not get the answer directly at that instant, but if we keep in mind and we just try to bring it out at a perfect timing, things might work for us. So please maintain a good communication. Build a network. This thing is very, very important, especially for people who will not have a good communication level with the professor. A lot of the things depend on the luck. A lot of the things depend on which lab we go to. Some labs are very welcoming. Some labs, it becomes a bit of hard work to make friends with. But when you have a situation and you realize that you are a bit on the type A, where your guidance is not a bit too helpful, and a lot is being expected from you without telling much, start building your network. Start having professors in your department. You will also need someone to write you a recommendation letter in case things don't work out with your own professor. Always keep a backup plan. The networks are always useful when your professor don't help you to get a job. You can always go to a friend, a different professor, and you discuss with them, and they can give you better ideas than a professor who expects you to do things yourself. The most important part of building a network is knowing others that you exist. It's very important. We are international students in a foreign land. We all come, our life is restricted for a very small area. We come in and finish our work, and then we go back for the day. If we don't go out ourselves and introduce ourselves to others, nobody in the institute will even know of our existence. So I would like to request you to try and be as proactive as possible. Go out and discuss and meet other researchers. And if you're in a conference, talk to people. These networks become very useful in the future when you decide that you want to start looking for a position in Japan or even outside Japan. A teaching assistant experience, it looks really nice in the CV. It becomes a bit difficult in most of the universities because they expect a certain level of Japanese because there are not many international students. And if you want to try and teach a mixed class with Japanese and international students, you need to have a certain level of Japanese. But there are always some courses where there are more international students or courses which are being taught in English. Please keep in mind that when you decide that you want to go for an academic position, these kind of teaching assistantship, they really leave an impression because you have an idea of surviving in a Japanese class or in a Japanese university class. It gives you a very beginner level of experience, but it's also a kind of a teaching. This is very different from US or other countries where teaching assistant is something really big. They give you a lot of responsibilities as a teaching assistant. It may not be that much in Japan, but if you ever get an opportunity of getting this kind of an experience, grab it. This is really something which all of us knows. If we don't publish, we cannot survive in the academic world. And because today's talk is about academic positions, one thing I want to clarify is if you don't publish by the end of our PhDs, it may not be easy for us to apply for a PhD for an academic position right after the PhD because we are unfortunately being judged by the papers and sometimes even by the numbers, unfortunately. So if we don't have a lot of publications, we might need to spend a bit of a time about a postdoc. We'll need to apply for some postdoc fellowships. I will cover that area too. But if you're planning on something or even at least trying for an academic position right after the PhD, try and publish. Try and publish. I'm not sure how many Max scholars are here today, and even our first Q&A was something related to this, about the extension. Because of Corona and everything, things are changing fast in Japan. But one thing that has changed over the last 4 or 5 years is a gradual decrease in the number of extensions from the max to masters to PhD. Based on my discussions with different juniors and even people of the same maxed year, a good scorecard leaves a big impression on when you apply for the extensions. And these days, even Maxt has actually announced a cutoff marks. If you count your score out of 3, I think it's something around 2.6 or something, before which you can even apply. So things are getting strict. So please keep in mind that the better grades you have a better chance of getting the extensions. If someone wants to ask if journal papers are important, basically from masters, we are not expected to publish papers, but because it all depends on who you compete with. So the more achievements you have, the better for you. but nothing can bypass your good scorecard. So please try to maintain a good grade while you are doing in your courses in masters, because in PhD, basically most of the universities, there are no courses. So, and you basically don't need an extension of that. If you're waiting for this part, this is where all the preparation, this is where all the recon you did before comes into action. When you have decided that you want to start looking for a academic position in Japan, I would like you to follow this. Doesn't matter, your professor is supportive of you, because sometimes the relationships change when the papers don't publish, or your professors start feeling that, no, he is not giving me good enough results and stuff. Doesn't matter what kind of reason it is. Our relationships with the professor changes with time, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and not every time it's in our hands. It's not easy to work on a PhD. It's not easy to work on a master's, which is working on something kind of a new idea. And when it's something new, there is no guarantee the results will come. All we can do is make sure we put in our efforts. So when you decide, when you see that you might be graduating soon, I would like to request you to start considering what you want to do after graduation 1 year before you graduate. Things in Japan always work in advance. Put this idea on the mind of a professor that you are considering an academic position in Japan. If your relationships, if your impression on your professor is really good, even if he doesn't tell you clearly, he might be start looking for a position for you. And the positions, and the most difficult part is, the positions doesn't come annually or something like that. The positions come when someone retires. The position comes when someone changes university. So a lot depends on the luck. If your relationship is good, he might even ask you to continue as a researcher for 6 months in the same lab before he can find a position for you. This is a win-win case. It doesn't happen usually. In case your advisor's response is not positive, in case he is someone who expects you to find something for you, start these things, which I'm going to list from now on. First, reach out to a network. As I told you before, have a backup option. Make a good relationship with some professor outside your lab. You can also work for a paper with him if you got the time. It's very difficult, but it's doable. Work with him, make good relationships with him. You might even need his recommendation in case your professor is not very helpful. So if your professor's response is not positive, start reaching out to an academic network. I'm introducing some portals. So this portal, if you just take a note of the name, it's easy to Google it. JIRAC, when you go to this area and you just select your area, it has engineering, social sciences, and everything. If you just select the area, it starts listing out the current openings in different institutions in Japan and sometimes in abroad too. I did this morning, and as you can see, there's also already a position open for research scientist, postdoctoral researcher, and even professor. So both for PhD fellowships and positions, you can check this out. Sometimes you can go to the websites of the individual universities. For example, Tokyo University, if there's a department you are interested in joining, if it's in Tohoku University, for my case, because I'm going to Hosei University, I'm mentioning this, you can go to the university website and start looking at the openings they have. This is a job announcement for a full-time lecturer, associate professor, or a professor. And if you look at the qualifications, they are saying that you need to have one of the following qualifications: PhD, minimum 3 years. It's saying at least one of them. So basically anyone with a PhD qualifies to fight for the position. So this is another option of looking into it. In case the PhD didn't go as planned, in case you couldn't publish papers, in case your results were not that good, consider doing a postdoc fellowship in Japan. For that, there are some fellowships. One is the highly competitive JSPS, but don't get scared when I use the term highly competitive, but it's always who you compete with. So whatever opportunity you get it, please do apply for it. JSPS has different openings at different types of the year. You just type JSPS in Google and I think you will get an idea. And a lot of the information is in English, very clear and easy to understand English. I think it will be very helpful for you. Another one which is not very popular is the JST Fellowship. There are certain areas where they have done some collaborative projects and there are some funding programs, and they do announce some positions for postdoc fellowships. A lot depends on the timing. Openings might be a bit less than JSPS, but it still exists. Third option, which I didn't want to write here, is if your lab is one of those labs who has a lot of Kakenhi funds. Kakenhi fund is an academic fund. It is one of the biggest funds in Japan, which every researcher looks up to. And if your lab has an access to a lot of Kakenhi funds, and even if they are involved with many other international projects, they can actually keep you for a postdoc for a good amount of time. They don't always tell you about this, but a lot depends on how your relationship develops with your professor. If he understands that one of the reasons why your PhD didn't work is not because you didn't put in the effort, was because of the novelty of the work, because the work itself was difficult, they usually offer you this kind of positions. And recently, there's another position. I know it's working in Kyoto University. Another position which is being started is specially appointed assistant professors. It's kind of a postdoc. It's a very contract-based, short-term period fellowship, but it's good money, and the name looks really nice. It's a specially appointed assistant professor. There are always options. You just need to explore. So please keep in mind that it's not that your opportunities in Japan are limited if you don't have too many papers after a PhD or something. One more important thing, which is recently growing, the ResearchGate and the LinkedIn. Always keep your profile updated in these two social media platforms for academicians. You never know. I think if someone of you has already been using this kind of things, many professors even announce positions. Many professors even announce postdoctoral fellowships through these platforms. So please stay connected with the rest of the world. And this is not always only for international people, but many professors in Japan who are much more internationally open-minded. They also use this kind of platform to take in the students or even recruit people through this kind of platforms. A quick summary. A good communication with the professor is a very, very important point if you're considering a future in academia in Japan. A good communication can take you a long way. He can actually build the whole thing for you if you guys are in sync. Improve your conversational Japanese. I'm not saying this, don't think I'm like forcing something upon you, but just try to think upon it as something from a different perspective. We came in Japan, and it's our responsibility to be a part of the society here. So learning the language is something that is expected of us. And maybe at some point, it's not very wrong of them to ask for it. So please consider improving the conversational Japanese as much as you can. It's gonna be very helpful for you. Build your network and let people know you exist. Publish, I won't say as much as you can, but as much good quality papers as you can. It doesn't need to be a very high number of conference papers or something. Depends on the department, of course. Computer science and others, the conferences are much more important than the journal papers. But a good quality 1 or 2 journal papers, it leaves a very big impression when you finish a PhD. And be proactive. You need to start looking for your own things in Japan. You need to work yourself. Don't expect too much from your professors. Feel free to reach out. I'm usually quick to respond, but if I don't respond within a day or something, just wait. Might be a little bit busy, and I promise I'll definitely get back to you. So whenever you want something to be discussed or something, feel free to reach out. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening.